Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe.
And today we're going to do a follow-up episode to a previous one, which was about our favorite sewing tools. And if you want to go back in history, you can go to episode 18, where we started talking about this particular topic. And we kind of realized, especially that I have so many tools that even though we spent an hour talking about our sewing tools, I still had like 4 or 5 left. So, and I know, Malena, that you also came up with a few more, right? After the last episode. So
yeah, I mean, some favorites and some I don't use that often, but are really good if you want to do this specific thing, and also something that I wish that I have next on my buying list.
Yeah, that's really good, because we also, sometimes you wonder, should we get those things or not? And it's also, when we talk about this, we're really interesting to hear your listeners as well, what your favorite tools are. And of course, you can always drop us a note on Stitching Tales Pod, our Instagram account, or on our YouTube channel, Stitching Tales Pod. So, Malena, I am curious now to know what is your another favorite sewing tool?
Well, one thing that I just completely forgot. I mean, you know my obsession with pressing, and I use my big regular-sized iron board to iron my fabric. I always give it a nice press, so it's no crinkles when I start to sew. I do that on my big iron board, but then when I press open my seams, press any seams basically, I could more or less only use this one. And this is actually it looks like a miniature of an iron board. It's basically for pressing sleeves, I think it's called like a sleeve pressing board or something. So it's I still have a price tag here. €1 had it was some secondhand shop or something. I think my mom actually got it for me. But it's like the perfect size when you just press the seams, because you don't need full iron board. You can have this one, and also if you don't have like a full sewing room, atelier or something, this is such a space saver when you use it. So I love it. It's so convenient to actually get the garment up a little bit as well, not just flat on the iron board, but you have it a little bit elevated, and also when you press, for example, kids' trousers, it's so convenient to just pull the trousers on, put the leg on, and press the seam. So I love it. I actually have 2 of them. You can't have. I don't know why. I don't use both. Obviously, I can't. That's a bit unnecessary. But I really recommend getting one.
That's a new thing, because we all know we are machine hoarders, but you're also an iron board hoarder. That's a very specific.
Apparently. Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
Trait. Yeah, I totally agree. I love it, and mine is also from a second-hand shop, which we should always say is a good tip, because these have a tendency to always find themselves into second-hand shops, because I honestly think that unless you're into pressing, especially in today's society, when most people aren't that concerned, I think, of fine pressing. So my imagine is that they have this, what should I do with this tiny kids board, and they don't really understand. I think, honestly, a lot of people today that doesn't sew or have an interest in garment that way, they have no idea what it is. So maybe if they inherit it, you just leave it to a charity shop. So mine as well, I just bought it for this similar amount, like $1 or €1, not much more. So it's a great tip to if you want to get this sleeve board and don't want to spend the full price. I can guarantee you will find it in a second-hand shop. I love it. There's so many advantages with it, especially also when you're pressing a hem on a garment, because the good thing, you can also rotate the garment, so you don't get any pressing marks, and you get so much easier access. So when I do before I do hem a pair of pants, for instance, I always use the sleeve board as well for pressing up the folds. And sometimes I find, if you're doing a collar, it just gives you, as you say, because it lifts it up and you give this access. So it's a wonderful tool. And I think if you're serious about sewing, you should definitely get one. If you really, as we say, pressing is so important. So it's a good investment, especially if you can get it for secondhand.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, just want to clarify with my pressing obsession, I never press my garments that I wear, after wash or anything. No, I just hang them to, hang them to dry, and that's it. I don't press my actual garments. It's just during the sewing that I'm slightly obsessed.
Okay. You're not the one doing, the exact routine on how to iron a shirt or anything like that, because it's a whole science. I've actually done a video.
No. My husband does his own shirts. So that's no. I never do that.
No, and you're actually wearing, if you're watching the YouTube video, you're wearing a shirt today, Malena, but you didn't iron it, right? Or
no, this is a summer shirt, it's cotton linen mix look-alike at least. So it's the colors are just both going. One is going in, one is going out, and it's a hot mess.
Yeah, it looks wonderful. But yeah, it's funny to say, and I mean, some people that's what I say, because a lot of people today, they don't really iron their garments. They are they can't be bothered unless you're into shirts, dress shirts, and you have this kind of interest and passion. I think most people, they don't want to iron. They rather wear it a little bit wrinkly. I am of the older school, I have to admit. I am definitely a big fan of ironing. I will confess that, yes. Sorry, I'm being.
But you have something else as well, right? Beside this small sleeve pressing board, you have something else that you use, right, to get sleeves and
yes,
pressed nicely.
That because when we were about to record, I remember I forgot it, but I'm going to just pick it up in a bit here.
Johanna is now running to her.
I'm back. Okay. Yes. So this was a thing that I heard many people recommend, and I was thinking, why? Because I already had a sleeve board, and I have a regular pressing board, and I have a good steam station. But I want to give a big shout out, and I know if you're into tailoring, you already know how great this is. But this is a Tailor Ham. So what it is a fabric covered piece. I think it's sawdust inside. So it's basically just a little. It's round and it's shaped, and it's primarily, I think, for pressing the sleeve openings, the sleeves when you're doing tailoring, because you can shape the garment so you get this nice kind of sleeve cap shaping using this. But what I discovered is that it's absolutely fantastic for a lot of other things as well, because of the round shape, you can use it, for instance, when I am pressing darts. It's absolutely wonderful because it just smooths out everything. And just like the sleeve iron board, it has this, it's so tiny and narrow, so you get so much better control using it. And it's also a tip, because if you sew darts or knit, which I do occasionally, and you Malena, also have knit top patterns with darts, and it can be a little bit tricky to get them to lie nice and flat. There is a tendency of puckering, especially if you're not used to it and getting this technique down. But I found that using this Tailor Ham is absolutely wonderful to press down darts, so they're really nice. You get rid of the puckering and the little pointy holes that can at the tip of the dart that you might encounter sometimes. So I definitely recommend it. It's not very expensive, and I'm pretty sure if you have some sawdust at home, I don't know why, but some I'm sure you do, you can probably make this yourself in a very quick manner. But I bought mine. It's nice, cotton flannel fabric, I think, and then the sawdust inside. So yeah, Tailor Ham, total worth the investment, even if you're not doing serious tailoring. So yeah, because as we say, you're pressing, if you get the right tools for pressing, you have a good iron, you have good technique, your garment would just look so much better. So yeah, that's my first tool. That was a I think I bought it maybe 3 or 4 years ago, so it's a relatively new purchase. But I should have listened to people who said get one before that.
I actually don't have one, but yeah, it makes like obviously when you press your sleeve, I mean that's a really 3D shape. How are you going to press it like perfectly nicely without getting how to say pleats or like marks if you just have it flat on the table? So it makes total sense to have to press it on a 3D shape that instead. So that is definitely on my wish list.
Yeah, get one. And also I think maybe I could be wrong here, but maybe someone who is more into the scientific stuff, but because the fact that it has sawdust inside, I think sometimes just like all the pressing board that was made of pressed sawdust, there is a added effectiveness of the fact that you're pressing towards this cellulose material. I find that it gives a nicer result than today. A lot of pressing boards are just made out of like metal with a mesh inside. They don't have the added sawdust or wood material, and I find, honestly, I think I get better result using wood than the modern stuff.
Yeah, no, with the steam and everything, that also there is a reason why it is flannel fabric, like a little bit softer. It's not like a flat cotton fabric. It actually has a little bit like 3D structure almost. Like it takes the heat, the moisture, everything. Like there's a reason why, and the sawdust is actually it's really doing its work as well. With the you're supposed to use steam when you use it. So yeah, there's a reason behind it.
Oh, that's good to hear. Then my hunch. Thank you for explaining this. So, Malena, do we have another favorite?
Well, this is not a favorite of mine, but I really recommend because I don't so much with woven these days. But if you do, and if you want to make your own bias tape, I really recommend this little tool. I don't know, do you have a name for it, Johanna?
I think it's called a binder folder. So it's basically a little metal tool where you insert bias tape unfolded, and then it automatically folds. So we're both holding up one each here. It's very easy because you just pull the unfolded fabric, and then you just iron it or press it at the other side. So you get this perfect like fold two sides, and it comes in different sizes.
Yeah, no,
of course.
It's really yeah, it's so convenient because as you said, you just put in the tape and then you can pin it down on your pressing board, so it's just like easy to pull, and then you go with your iron behind it and it just folds in the edges, so it gets like perfect. Like, don't do this by hand by yourself. Like this little tool is so convenient if you want to do your own bias tape, or doesn't even have to be your own bias. I mean, just along the grain line, because if you do so with woven, and you can get so nice finishes with the bias tape, or with any tape if you use the shell fabric, so you don't have to buy that specific bias tape. You can make it yourself, and there are great tutorials if you just Google it, like how you cut them. So that one I can really, really recommend if you sew, or if you want to sew with a bias tape. Like, it's so much easier to than to by yourself fold and measure. Like, you're not gonna get even edges, but this one is a little bit miracle worker.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it's very expensive either, and it's so nicely designed. And as you say, also because when you cut the bias tape on the bias, it's going to have some natural stretch, and it will distort. So as soon as you start to try to fold it and press it, you will drag it out. So unless you use this tool, you will never be able to get it even, especially if you cut a softer fabric on the bias, because it has so much give. I totally agree with you. And also, it's so nice because even though you can get bias tape pre-made. At least here in Sweden, I would say that they suck, honestly, because there are basically just two versions. Either it's a really stiff, rigid, like really cheap cotton, or they use this polyester satin that again feels a little bit cheap. Whereas if you use, say, if you have as Malena said, your self fabric, or maybe you have some scraps of a silk fabric or a soft cotton fabric, it's just different hand. It just, if you want to do like Hong Kong finishers where you, for instance, enclose the seam allowance using bias tape, which is a beautiful high-end technique. If you buy pre-made, honestly, at least here in Sweden, I'm not saying it's the same in other countries, but it's going to cheapen the look if you use pre-made bias tape. That's a hill I am ready to die on because it's just I've never encountered good quality bias tape in a Swedish fabrics shop, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's so convenient that you can make your own, because then it's like the exact right color, the same hand feel, like it's gonna wash, like it's gonna age the same way as the fabric is. So that one I really recommend. Was that on your favorite tool list as well, or?
Yes, because I just came to think, because now I'm holding up a smaller version than Malena showed, and this one I just want to give like a bonus tip, because last week I worked on my jeans sewing course, and one of the things that I do, of course, is making belt loops. And if you have a cover stitch machine, because in the garment industry the belt loops are done with a cover stitch machine, so you stitch 2 rows and then you have the loops on the other side that covers the fold. Or you can also, if you want to do belt loops, you can use a twin needle. Then you will get the zigzag stitch on the reverse side, and then straight lines on the. There are special twin needles for denim as well that you can get. And so this one, which is narrow, it has the exact same width as a finished belt loop. So what you can do is, if you can actually cut strips, and then just like you would do with bias tape, you can just fold in the rectangle of the denim, press it, and you get like pre-made super crisp belt loops, just the right width and super sharp. So that's an additional way of using these bias tape without using fabric cut on the bias. So that's a tip. And I'm going to show, we of course on our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, we're going to upload some pictures, and I will show you this how the belt loops way of doing it as well with the bias binder.
And I think this is really good to know as well when you sew, that everything is not just done by your hand to get like a nice even finish. For example, you showed just recently, I saw you put it up on Instagram, a reel where you made pockets, like a back pockets on a pair of jeans. Like you actually use the pattern piece, like you trim away the seam allowance, and then you use it as a, mull. What do you call it in English?
Press template. So it's like a cardboard, it's different template, paper. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So.
So yeah, you fold the seam allowance edges towards that template, and then you get like the exact, really so crisp edges. So like you are allowed to use these kind of helping tools to actually get like the real nice clean finishes. So don't think that you have to do everything by freehand, so to say. Like these tools are really like so helpful to get that really nice finishes.
Yeah.
What else do you have on your favorite tool list?
Yes. So another tool that I'm a big fan of, which I wanted to talk about last time, but we didn't have time because we went over an hour. Now what I'm holding in my hand now is a seam gauge, and in Sweden we call this fificus. But what I'm holding is a metal seam, and it's so hard to explain. Again, we're gonna post this on our Instagram account, and of course, if you watch the YouTube version, you will see it. But this one has the most common distances when you're sewing. This is a metric system, so it has 1 centimeters, 1.5. It has 4 centimeters, 2 centimeters, and 6 centimeters. So it covers all So in instance, if you want to add seam allowance on a sewing pattern, you use these, and it's so easy to add the seam allowance because it has it's like cut in the corner, so you can just follow it. And this is very, very common in Sweden. And I'm going to hold up another version now, which I think is more common in other countries, which has this slider. But I find that so flimsy compared to this one, metal. And the one I'm holding in my hand, I bought at Self-Made, which is a big brand store that is available in all around Europe, I think. So it's pretty accessible. And I'm sure you will find similar ones in empirical measurements. But what I love about this one is that it's done in metal. It's not plastic, because when you're doing some pressing, right, you don't want to mess around with too much plastic, because heat, plastic, kind of a risky combination. And trust me, I've done it. It just happened this weekend because I couldn't find this seam gauge, so I ended up using measuring tape. Big mistake. So this is again what I love about this. It can touch a little bit of metal, and I won't have like melted plastic on my iron or my iron board. So yes, seam gauge, love it, in metal in particular.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because I have one as well. Mine is in plastic, and I haven't used it in years. But yesterday I did. I sewed a T-shirt, and I wanted to like be really like exact with the hem. So I actually used it when I pressed the hem to get the exact right measurement, which is funny that you bring it up, because again, I haven't used mine in years, because, well, you know, when you work with this, I have a quite good like eye measurement, like I can see, and whenever I sew these days, I'm like, well, I mean, I'm pretty like precise, like I can wing it with how much I press up for the hem. But yesterday I was like, no, now I'm gonna be like, now I want to have the exact measurement, so I'm gonna double check it with that one. So yeah, I used mine yesterday, and I did press it under the hem with the iron. It was fine. I did it very quickly, so no accidents happened. But yeah, it's very, very convenient.
Yeah, it is, because the corners, it's sharp, so you don't have to gauge and to find that line where the exact measurements, because since all these corners are the exact, so you just have to align it with that corner. So the as you say, the hem will start and finish with a clear corner, instead of having to figure, where is that tiny line over there, and you try to like look up close. So I know that this is more common in Europe, I think, unfortunately, than in other parts of the world. But I've seen it on Amazon as well, as at least the plastic ones in empirical. So definitely check it out if you really want to get that exact stuff. Especially if you're not like Malena and has great eye gauging, like natural. you need again, don't be hard on yourself. Take all the help you can get. And again, this is a really cheap tool. So do you have any more stuff? Do you want to share, Malena?
I have one last thing. I don't have it. This is on my wish list as well. It's instead of like when you do markings. To be honest, I'm really like, I use whatever I have handy, you know, when I do markings. I actually also sometimes use like, you know, a regular pen, blyertspenna, or what do you call it? Pencil?
Pencil, yeah.
Yeah, when I draw, I mean, it's on the inside, and obviously I'm gonna like, you know, check depending on what color the fabric is, if it's gonna be see-through or not. But I'm pretty like, yeah, whatever works. But I really would like to buy one of these instead of having like a regular Tailor chalks. Like it's like a small plastic thing instead that has like this chalk powder in it, and it has a small wheel at the end. So when you pull the fabric, like the wheel is spinning and leaving small traces of this powder. So it's like really convenient to draw, and it gets like really nice line. And do you have one,
Yes.
Johanna?
So
Do you have one of these, or?
This is called a charcoal liner, clover charcoal liner, right? Exactly what you say. So I just want to show everyone who's watching this. It has, as you say, it has a powder dispenser, and then it has this tiny like tracing wheel, and it's wonderful. I love it. So the white one I highly recommend. It also comes in colors, but then you have to be careful because I found that it can get stuck inside the fabric and cause some miscoloring. So I only feel confident in recommending the white one. Clover tracing wheel, yeah, it's much more precise than chalk.
Yeah, because when you chalk, you need to press it down a little bit, and like the fabric gets pulled out a little bit as well when you draw it. But on this one, like you don't need to add any pressure basically to the fabric. And then I haven't seen like that as a. It looks like basically like a pen, but I've seen like it more. I'm gonna see if I can find some pictures of it and add it on our Instagram account. But I've seen different variations of it. But those seem like really, really handy tools when you want to draw on the fabric. So that is definitely on my wish list. Yeah. Do you have more things that you like?
Always more things. But first of all, I'm going to give a shout out if loyal listeners have already heard Malena say that this is an invaluable tool. I don't think it was an episode about tools. I think it was another episode. But speaking about ironing and pressing, that you have a timer. So what I'm holding up is one of those socket with a timer. So you set the timer on an hour or 2 hour. And after that, the electricity is cut. So if you plug your iron into this, it will automatically shut the power off because obviously you don't want your iron to just keep on going, especially because. And
I feel there's a story coming here.
There's a story coming.
What happened? What have you done?
Yes. Oh, so embarrassing. Anyways. Because when you talked about this and you said it's such a great tool, I was like, yeah, I need to get one of those. Did I? No, of course not. But then, as I mentioned previously, I was doing this jeans course. I've been filming it like day and night. So it's basically, I've spent all my waking hours the last week or so doing this. Anyways, so I was really tired one evening. So I was like, and I just need to go home because I have a sewing studio that is, a 5 minutes walk from my home. So I leave it, and that's nice to leave your work behind. But anyways, the next day I come into the sewing studio, and there's a very strong, unpleasant smell of heat.
No.
Of heat and burning. I was like, oh no. So yes. I left the iron on overnight at like the highest temperature as well because I'm ironing jeans, so I'm like really cranking up the heat. I mean, no accident, but just the fact that when you open the door to the sewing studio and you can like smell like burning. Oh, that was so scary. So just until I was like, just as the shop opened that day, I just ran out and got one of those, like this timer. So I just need to remember now to set it because it doesn't. You have to every time you have to actually reset the timer. So you just can't have it on. You also need to remember to set the timer on. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's like so scary wake up call when you're like, right, whoa, that could have really bad consequences. Like. It's so scary when those things happens.
Yeah. Sometimes you really need to really get that close to fire, so to speak, to get to actually, as we say in Sweden, like have the chip to fall down. Like you have to get that realization. Sometimes it has to hit you in the face at least once, and sometimes twice. So yeah, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but now I'm a changed woman, and I will do as you say, Malena.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you should never trust like that thing as well, because I mean obviously that thing could also not work for some reason someday. So I mean you should always unplug your iron after you're done. But at least like this is like an extra safety thing if you don't remember. So no, it's so good. And yeah, it's super annoying when it's like, oh yeah, it shut down by itself, and you are ironing, and it's like, why is nothing happening? Happened a couple of times, yes, but I mean, at least that is better compared to catastrophic things, the consequences that could actually be.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good. Good, you are a changed woman now.
Yeah, more responsible. So, and of course I have a couple of more things that I also wanted to plug. First of all, again, a pretty inexpensive tool that I find really invaluable. And that, what I'm holding up now, is a buttonhole cutter. So when you're sewing buttonholes, you can of course use a seam ripper. It's a good option. But I find that this one, which has a very sharp blade, and it comes in different sizes, but you can just get a small one and so just push it into the sewn buttonhole. If the fabric is heavy, you can use a hammer to just hammer it down. And you get this really crisp, exact thing. Because obviously if you're using a seam ripper, what you should do is you put pins at both the ends of the buttonhole, so that and then you cut the seam ripper to half of the opening, and then you go to the other side and half opening, so you can definitely do it. But a seam ripper tends to get quite dull, whereas a buttonhole cutter, it's much, much sharper. So I've pretty much stopped using a seam ripper unless it's a very tricky fabric. So, and this again is very inexpensive. This is the Clover brand. I think it's a good quality brand. Maybe it's Japanese. And so, yeah, mine is 12 millimeters, which I find is small enough for most buttonholes. 12 millimeters is about half an inch. I think there's a smaller one as well, but even if you're doing big buttonholes, you just push it down a couple of times. So it looks like, what do you call it? Those flat screwdrivers. They don't have the star, but the flat one. So it looks similar to that, but it's just a wider blade. So what do you do, Malena, to open your buttonholes?
I mean, I don't remember when I sewed a buttonhole, to be honest, but I use a seam ripper. And then, but yeah, with a big disclaimer, I always, like, I don't just, like, pull it without any control, because you can so easily take it too far and it will basically rip a hole in your whole buttonhole then. So I always pull up the end, so I have like a few millimeters at a time that I rip open, and I always do it from like the outer edges towards the middle. So it like give me the really control. But the negative about that is also that then it's like visible that you have done it in several steps. I can imagine that this one gives it a more crisper finish when you do it like the whole piece in one. So, and especially also for like really heavy, sturdy denim fabric, for example, I can really understand that it gives a lot. It gives a nicer finish. But but no, I haven't used one actually. Interesting to hear. I've seen it obviously, but I have never tried it. It feels like a woodworker's tool, basically.
That's exactly the word I was looking for. Exactly, that kind of woodworker's tool. Exactly, that's how it is. So I'm just for you who's not watching the video version, I'm holding up now a pair of jeans and a buttonholes, because it's quite unless your seam ripper is very sharp and crisp, and they do tend to get dull. It's really hard to get that. Nice clean cut, and this just helped a lot. Of course you will still have a little bit of threads and stuff like that, but you can just pull that away, but the cut is so much cleaner and so much more controlled.
Maybe a stupid question then, but when you have like a buttonhole, and I maybe you use this more often for denim, but you have these buttonholes that has like a little circle at the end for like, well, specifically a more chunkier button. How do you do that?
I do that with my vintage Bernina sewing machine from the 80s because it has the keyhole button as an option.
Yeah,
so,
but sorry, yeah, but when you actually make the hole, do you make it like a little round hole then as well, or do you just use the tool that you just showed to...
Okay. So what I can do then is that I use, I think I mentioned that the last time, the awl, the sharp piercing tool. So you can use that to get that slightly rounder opening. But honestly, I find that just pulling that and just pulling away the threads is enough. So I don't, because the keyhole buttonhole, it's not that big, so you don't need to. I guess you could use the one of those what's called plier, right?
Where that you with leather.
Yeah. I have one of those as well, but I have never actually used it for that keyhole. I've just used the awl to get that roundness at the end, a bigger awl with a bigger tip.
Interesting. But that's I need to try that. Next time I do a buttonhole, I will try to get my hands on one of those and make it as you should.
And honestly, we all want to avoid making buttonholes as much as possible, right? I mean, it's not the most enjoyable thing.
No, and if you ever do a buttonhole, obviously this is the time that you should always do a test before you do the actual buttonhole on your real garment. Like that is, I can't stress that enough. Like always do 1 or even 2 buttonholes, so you see that they become exactly the same size. That always do a test.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you have next on your favorite tool list? You have more gadgets than me. More gadgets.
It's a never-ending well, and I have 2 things. The first one I'm holding up here is a notcher. What is it called, Malena? It's a little plier tool which we use to cut the markings and the notches on a sewing pattern. So it cuts away a tiny snip. Because we often talk about this, Malena, that we like to rather use a scissor to mark notches rather than, doing some cumbersome other marking techniques or using a pen, for instance. Especially if you're working with woven fabrics and knit fabrics as well. If you're able to cut small enough notches into the seam allowance, I think it's a way. But of course, the problem when you're using a sewing pattern in paper is that to cut the notches. You can of course put the scissor underneath the marking on the pattern, but if you use this pattern notcher, you just cut away just a small into the seam allowance, so you can just cut the scissor. So it's a very helpful tool, and I think it's very common in the professional industry to use this. So again, not necessary by any means, but I find it super helpful. So I always notch all my sewing patterns, unless it's in tissue, using this little notcher.
And it's so convenient also if you have like a more sturdier paper for your pattern, that if you do the notches in that way just on the paper, but then you actually, I mean, as you said, it cuts out a little space. So then you can also like draw the notches in that space when you mark your pattern. Yeah. So it's really, I don't have one, but I've seen it and it's like it feels fancy.
Yeah, it feels fancy. It's not expensive, but it definitely feels like you're going pro. You brought
exactly a pro feeling.
Yeah, so this is a very inexpensive way to feel a little bit more professional about your sewing. And you bring up a great point, as you say, Malena. It's just as good as for pen marking, because I think it's a couple of millimeters, so it's very small, but it's enough for the tip of the pen or tracing pen to get inside that little space. And you can, but depending on how deep you cut, you can make small notches or larger notches. I think the depth is about less than 1 centimeter in total, so it's not very deep. Yeah, great little tool. And my final one is not actually a sewing tool, but it's a good thing to have, and that is I'm holding up now a good old lighter. Is it called? Yeah. So I think is it called lighter in English, right? When you
I think so.
Yeah. So there are two great things to use this for, and this is one of the old school way of figuring out what type of fibers or material is in a fabric. There's, depending on if you have access to a fabric where you have no idea of the content of the material, is it polyester, is it wool, is it silk, is it rayon, is it cotton, and that's really, really hard to figure out sometimes. But what's so fascinating is that there's every type of material will behave differently once you set it on fire, so to speak, or expose it to heat. So, for instance, if it's wool, it's going to behave in one way. If it's plastic, it's going to get hard and like curl up. And at least in older sewing books, there's a guide, so we can get an exact idea of, depending on how it should smell, how it should feel, how it should behave. Of course, some materials will not even set on fire; it will just slowly melt. So that's a really good, I think, a bit of a forgotten method to figure out the material in a fabric, and that's one way. But the good thing, as I said, it melts plastic. So what I'm holding now in my hand is some polyester velvet ribbon. And if you have any type of cords or ribbon that is made out of synthetic, you might not want to, it's going to be difficult to finish the edges, right? If you have a cord, for instance, if you're sewing a jacket or a hoodie and you have cords and you don't want them to fray, if there is a synthetic material, you just enclose it with, just gently burn the edges of the... So then if you just do it, I'm going to hold it up now, just a quick. This, you can't see it, but it has this hard edge now, and it won't fray. So that's a really good tip if you want to do any type of decoration or add. And as long as it doesn't work on cotton, obviously, because that won't melt. It's a really good tip, I find.
Yeah, that sounds very convenient. Then you don't have to zigzag the edges, and it will be basically invisible. Like you can't really see it with your eyes. Yeah.
So I think that was about it for mine. Probably we can do a follow-up episode, but we do have a few things. First of all, we would love to hear if you have any favorite sewing tools, or maybe you have some that you really want to get. So please share either on our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, or our YouTube channel. And also, we want to do a Q&A episode. So if you have any questions that you would like to hear my and Malena's take on, we would love to hear that. And again, of course, you can comment on the channels that I just mentioned. But we also now have an email address, which is stitchingtalespod in one word @gmail.com. So if you don't want to do it on social, you can also, of course, email us. So if you have any questions, it can be about sewing, maybe about running a sewing business, anything. We just love to get questions, and we would do our best to answer them in a clear manner, hopefully. And also we have another announcement as well, Malena, because this is in the summertime, so we're going to take a little summer break, right?
Yeah, exactly. We need a little holiday to enjoy the summer here.
Yeah.
And before speaking of summer, I have a little bonus tips. It is sewing related, but it's not a tool. Have you seen? There are 3 new series about designers that I just binge watched 2 of them, and I'm starting the 3rd one. Becoming Karl Lagerfeld and Cristobal Balenciaga. They both are at Disney Plus, I think.
Yep.
And on Apple TV, it is The New Look. So, I mean, I am like drooling over these series. Like, amazing, especially the Christian Balenciaga. Is like the knowledge he has, the technique he does is just like, oh, it's so beautiful. I mean, it's not documentaries or anything, so it's like it is fictional based on real events, basically. But it's just, oh, it's eye candy all the way. So if you were wondering what to watch this summer, I highly recommend these 3 series. And I hope that this is a trend that, like, okay, we are going to see more about, I mean, Coco Chanel is obviously also, they talk a lot about her in these series. But I hope, like, she will get her own series as well. I wish, fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's such a good
Have you watched any of them?
Yes, I've watched Becoming Karl Lagerfeld, and that's interesting because it's a little bit gossipy as well. It's more of a, it's so I'm really curious about the other two, the Balenciaga, and I'm really, really curious. And I think also, which is, speaking of women, there's a new documentary about Diane von Furstenberg. I also think it's on Disney+. I'm going to check it out. So that's also interesting because that's, being a woman in the fashion business and, her struggles. And I think it's going to be a really interesting, and as you say, Coco Chanel, obviously, definitely an intriguing story that needs to be told. I mean, there have been some, I've seen a movie, but I haven't seen a series maybe. But yeah, it's a good, I agree with you. It's a nice trend that they actually, the fact that these are really interesting persons and also they have a fascinating story and, making entertainment out of it. This is, I'm definitely going to jump to the Balenciaga and the Dior one as well. Yeah, I'm very intrigued.
And what I really loved about the Karl Lagerfeld and the Balenciaga, they were actually speaking French or German or Spanish, depending on who was obviously speaking. And it was just like so nice to hear different, like the original languages as well.
Yeah.
The new look is in English, even though like it's played out in Paris. But it's always a little bit cringy when they speak with a French accent, but they speak English. So to actually hear when, the actor is switching from French to German or French to Spanish, it was just like, it was a different experience watching a series with the original language. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also because again, I've only seen the Karl Lagerfeld, but I also really like that they have, actors that are French and German. I really appreciate they will mix the language as well, but it's so nice to see also not obviously the one that plays Karl Lagerfeld, Daniel Brühl, I think he's a pretty well-known actor, but I think all the other has been in Inglourious Bastards, I think, with by Tarantino. And more, but again, it was so nice to see also not all, at least for us, not familiar faces, because sometimes if the actors are too well known and the faces kind of gets in the way, in a way. So I really liked about Karl Lagerfeld, there were so many French actors that I wasn't familiar with. So that was really, as you say, it's a nice way, to actually, to not everything has to be in English, because even though it's a language that is well known, yeah. Great tip, Malena, great tip. And I'm definitely going to check out the other ones as well. And then if you have any more, you listening, if you have any more suggestions, we would love to hear them as well. Because
please share. Yes. I'm a little bit obsessed now. I want to more. I need more.
Yeah, we want
movies as well. Just please, if you have any tips for me.
Yeah, and I also I did watch the Galliano documentary at a film screening, because Galliano, obviously, we know has a very controversial past, but it's also was a really interesting and I think pretty nuanced documentary about his story that I can highly recommend. And also I think there's about Alexander McQueen as well. I think it's also available on Disney Plus or one of those channels as well. So it's also interesting to hear, the current designers and getting the backstory, and it's also the mental health struggles that a lot of these people are going through as well. It's not an easy, as you get that sense from watching a lot of these. It's a difficult business to be in, a lot of pressures, and so it's very fascinating to get that more personal behind the scenes story as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna look into that. So exciting! It's a perfect summer watch, I think.
All right then.
Yeah, we are gonna have. I don't know. We haven't decided exactly how long of a break. Maybe 1 month. I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good. So maybe we'll do a comeback in August. That sounds reasonable, I think. And of course, then we're gonna answer your questions. So do remember to email those at stitchingtalespod@gmail.com or on our other channels. Of course, links will be in the description section. So we wish you a nice, happy sewing summer. And I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.